Hello and welcome to my presentation for this Unraveling the Hero's Journey. I'm going to talk about negotiated narratives. My name's Anna.zaluczkowska. I'm from Leeds Beckett University. Negotiated narratives is a sort of term that I've coined that looks at narratives which are constructed by more than one author. So, I think for this presentation, I'm just going to assume that we kind of all agree that interactive play or participation is a kind of defining element of transmedia, and therefore it's really important. And I think this has been substantiated by both sort of theoretical thinkers and practitioners. So I'm not going to debate that very much. But a lot of what we've experienced in both documentary and in fictional forms has been has really only offered a very limited notion of what interactivity could be. So, things where people can comment or they can make a choice of this way or that way, branching narratives and the like. But it's kind of still assumes that the author's in control. So I think this is what has led Tracy Fullerton to suggest that this classical dramatic arc that you find in the hero's journey is still alive and well today, even in interactive forms such as games. Now, I know that was in 2008 and things have moved along again. I mean, there are plenty of people who disprove this now and take challenge it. But I think this model is still kind of alive and well. But I don't think it really helps us to understand the interactive form. And it's mostly been about how a story will be successful rather than, what is the role of the audience. So I have worked with many different alternative models. I'm not here to advocate one above others and say which is more useful to the interactive form, but I've used all of these forms in my storytelling. I mean, for me, this has come from different film type storytelling forms, but I think all of these different elements can be brought together and used in some useful way in transmedia and interactive forms. So let's look at a bit more detail. Jennings is pointing out, this sort of relationship or mechanism that's available in African oral storytelling between the narrator and the story, and that people have some agency in terms of being able to shape that. And I think that has happened in quite a lot of transmedia forms. So Sherlock, for instance, where there's this what we know as a feedback loop, if you like, where people can comment and say what they want to happen, and sometimes the writers put that in, and sometimes they sort of use it for their own storytelling purposes. But there's a kind of negotiation, if you like, between the audience and the writers about how the story will progress. And these types of views, there's some more quotes here. I'm not going to read them all out. They're there for you. But these views have been, expressed by loads of different writers, but also those writing about digital storytelling. But it's not always clear, how these can be best put to use beyond that feedback mechanism. And often really it's only using that as a kind of peripheral way with limited agency. And I think we kind of need something more than that. So if we extend that to, say, what goes on in Asian type literature, drama, or films, where there's much more emphasis on the interconnectedness between us and life and society. I think, this gives us a much richer element. And this next slide here is some examples that have been put together by Conitz and others about the many different types of narratives that you can find across the world, which allow people to get involved in different ways, or to, you know, use different structures that have more than one central character, or more complex, if you like, and discursive, you know, often circular, or based on cycles, and tensions between opposites, and sort of so that that discourse can build, so that the audience has a kind of, you know, an experience that will eventually bring about some sort of realization or idea of how the story will conclude. And so bringing that into in addition to the feedback loop, I think gives a richer element. But there are also many participatory theatre models which have been used in interactive theatre. You know, so these are the ideas of Boal, Brecht, Johnson, O'Neill, Grotowski even, that challenge that relationship between the audience and author. I'm really interested in these at the moment to sort of see, you know, what we can use. And I know others have studied these in the past, but I think we could look at them again and see what's useful for storytelling processes in this respect. So, and I think what's particularly interesting is this liveness that, if you like, can be brought to the interactive experience. So, as I've said, I've used all of these in my stories, but I think Bronwen Patrick's work has kind of really influenced it. She talks about a sort of digital process drama, or these kind of forms being more event orientated rather than narratives as such. And I think these are interesting ideas. So the two projects that I've worked on most recently are Red Branch Heroes, which basically set up a reality TV show type scenario that was pretending to look for a new hero for Northern Ireland, so a new Cuchulainn, a sort of modern champion. And here I asked the audience, if you like, to become judges and to interrogate the applicants. And they met these fictitious people and discussed things with them. So it kind of put them into that very Brechtian scenario of having to question what was real and what wasn't, and use their own ideas to decide how best to navigate the story. Interestingly enough, they chose a hero for Northern Ireland in the end, who was somebody who was unemployed, male, and had quite a problematic relationship with both his children and his family. So it was interesting that the idea of a hero was challenged in itself. The other project that I've been involved in is Secret Story Network, and it's a kind of it's a sort of role-playing game, if you like, but it's an online app that encourages people to get involved in a whole array of different stories. So it's much less onerous than say Dungeons and Dragons or any of those other role-playing games. It's short, it's up to an hour long, and it asks people to get involved in storytelling in lots of different ways. So not just about text or spoken word. It's about, you know, creating all sorts of videos or photos or sound, and getting involved. And there's a number of things that have become obvious from this work. So my work on Red Branch Heroes was really about writers as orchestrator and designers, rather than, and performers actually, rather than, you know, sort of dealing with text. and that, you know, lots of collaboration was needed between all the elements of people who are working on it. The notion of improvisation was really important, of course, but also games and gamifying and play. And the participation wasn't promoted necessarily by providing this story for people, but by leaving real holes and problems where they had to get involved and bring their own skills to find a solution. So that was about, it's also about creating multiple entry points. And maybe with Secret Story, what was found to be important was this idea of creating a community. So people got used to playing together and understanding how each other work, and using their canon, if you like. So whether that's local stories or myths that they particularly get engaged with, creates a different, you know, that helps with the community building. And what we ended up doing, if you like, was creating an experience rather than a particular story. So the story changes every time, but the experience remains similar. And a big learning lesson, I suppose, was keep it simple. Don't get overly complicated. And the story conductor, or the story master, as is used in role-playing games, is a person who's kind of a conduit. They're not in control as such, but they have power. But they are there to try and make a satisfactory experience for everybody. So it's kind of using the group's creativity in order to help negotiate and work together. So those are the things that I've been doing. But what I'm interested in now is this whole idea of carnival, and particularly Caribbean carnival. At Leeds Beckett, we have carnival scholars, and listening to them talk about the ways in which carnival operates, suddenly thought, actually, this is a really interesting form, and that's what I'm going to be doing, is working on next, is thinking about how does carnival involve huge numbers of people at different levels and with different experiences. So some people, for instance, get really, really involved in the grand scheme of things, make hugely elaborate costumes, while other people just turn up and input small elements on the day. And I'm interested in this issue of top-down and bottom-up contribution in terms of carnival and the tensions there. And so that will be my next investigation, and look at the ways in which carnival actually can engage with this whole sort of intersectional nature of society, and throw up some really provocative forms, as well as very traditional ways in which people can get involved. So thank you very much. I hope it's been useful. All right. Bye.